if one does service, if one does good karma, but for example, this was a court order for community service, so it's not really voluntary, and then someone is doing this community service on court order simply with the motivation avoiding going to jail and fulfilling that because the court has ordered it. And how much benefit there is for you and how much karma you make, no? That's the question.
Yes, and whether it still benefits the people you're working with.
It still benefits the people, okay. So the crucial question or the crucial factor for karma is intention. So if you truly did it only to avoid jail or to do it because you're forced, then there's basically no real good karma. However, in practice, I think even if you start off simply because you're ordered, or you can take other examples, it's not just a court order for community service, but sometimes maybe a family may drag a family member to the monastery. They don't really want to go, but socially it's very awkward, it can't wiggle out. I think often once a person goes or does that service, they will have at least partially also an intention to do something good, and they may notice that it's beneficial. Some people don't. In Perth once we had a guy, a very young man, who had such a kind of obligation from the court for community service, and he used it to steal from us. And he would still work there, but he was just waiting for an opportunity to get into some of the unlocked kuttis and then steal the headlight. He actually stole Ajahn Dhammasiha's headlight, which was quite ironic. This person has given up a billionaire's inheritance from his father, so to speak. And now had his headlights stolen by this guy ordered to do community service. And in that case, obviously, that is his true and genuine intention. It's a bad one, really unwholesome. And he may not have had any real intention of helping there. But I think most people, if they get nudged along, if they get a little bit forced and so on, there may well be some good intention. But not necessarily. And it can also happen if you forced someone to do it, that they have a really strong hatred to it in their mind, even if externally they comply. I mean, I had that mind state quite a bit when I did my military service in Germany. And even if I'm actually not really doing anything useful there, because anything is just preparing for war and killing. So I didn't lose out on anything, but I was often present there, and I really, really hated it, and you really cultivate that. And if you do a service, not military now, but something that is actually beneficial for others and would be good, but somehow you have been forced into it, and all the time you're just making it really clear in your mind that you hate it and you don't want to do it, then I don't think you make any good karma. In terms of whether other people benefit, I think they do benefit. For example, convict labor, I don't think these people would have done that voluntarily, and they probably would hate it, and some died over the hard work they did. But if the vote is in the right location, it will have later benefited people. So I think this is a little bit separate. And I think it is possible that you are just forced to do something, you don't make any good karma because you genuinely hate it and you do the absolute minimum, but the result of your efforts may still be beneficial to others. I think that is quite possible.
And if you personally benefit or enjoy something, intention.
But usually if you enjoy it, then you have a much stronger intention of doing it. So there's many factors coming together. And if you come to the monastery and really enjoy offering food to the Sangha, now this is incredible good karma. I mean, this is already good karma if you don't really enjoy it, but you still have the intention of doing it. Maybe you believe that is good karma, but you're tired or you don't really want to do it, you would still make lots of good karma, even if you don't enjoy it, as long as the intention is there. However, if you have the intention of doing that and offering the food, and ideally even some conviction that it's good karma, and additionally you enjoy it, first of all, it usually means that your intention is stronger. If you do something with joy, the intention is usually stronger. Secondly, your mind will be in a much better shape. And uplifting your mind is already a good karma in and by itself, for whatever reasons. So you're making good karma simply by looking after your mind and bringing it into a bright and radiant and wholesome emotion. The next thing is, if you really enjoy it, it usually means that you also have a good memory of it. Something I really enjoy doing, it usually means later I tend to recollect it, and that is an additional good karma. Now you have done some good action, and then later you remember it, and you feel happy about it. This is an additional act of good karma, every time you do that. But usually if you really hated doing it, then you will not remember it, or if you remember it, then there's a kind of negative memory. On the other hand, if you actually enjoy doing something good and doing a service, and then later you remember it, it's a joyful memory. And joyfully remembering your good actions, there's heaps and heaps of good karma.
But for the recipient, the benefit is pretty much the same, no matter what your intention is or was.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for example, with food, obviously the most important thing is that a being receives food. It doesn't matter so much what's the intention. However, having said that, I believe that there is a subtle energy in food which depends on who prepares it and with what kind of mind state. I wouldn't be able to explain that in the Western, so to speak, scientific paradigm, but from experience and so on, I feel it makes a big difference. And in that sense, in a monastery, you get some of the best food you can possibly get. Now, I know some supporters, they do that as a tour act of their spiritual practice, and they may be listening to Pavita and chanting while they are cooking. So this is really exceptional, with a really great dedication, how they prepare the food. And I believe there's some energy of that which you get. And I also believe if you have the same difference if, say, your mother cooks for you, or your wife, or something like that, not someone who loves you, or you just go through some shop in a McDonald's where people work for minimum wage or something, and often probably not doing that because they love cooking for you, because they somehow have to get the money to survive, and they may be hating what they're doing there. They may still make some effort because they recognize they want to do a good job and the people want to eat decent food, but it's something totally different, and I believe that it somehow will affect you. I can't explain it, but I believe that. And there's something really special when you live the life of a monk, and you basically always, all the time, get that food, which is given with that intention and with that motivation and with that dedication. It's maybe one reason that it's also popular here. People come and they enjoy eating here. And I don't necessarily think that everyone who prepares food for Dhammagiri is a chef, professional chef or a star cook who gets the Michelin stars. But they usually all have this spiritual motivation, and they do it with dedication and faith, and it's mostly focused, I believe, it's mostly focused on the Sangha, but still the same food. So when you come and you join, and then we share all the food, and you get the same energy when you eat that. And I believe there's a big difference. Yeah. I think in general it is nicer to receive a service joyfully given. And again, as a monk, I'm in the fortunate situation because I never pay people for anything. Whatever they do, it's always a kind of voluntary. So you become totally used to that people genuinely interact with you and give you something out of genuinely good-heartedness and wanting to make good karma. And on these India pilgrimages, we sometimes stay in hotels. And sometimes in Varanasi, that is even a fairly good luxury hotel. And I remember Lalani was always concerned that the cheap hotels, in particular Varanasi, that people don't get sick and it can be difficult for old people and so on, and India. And people are exceedingly, the employees there in the restaurant and so on, they're exceedingly polite and helpful when they interact with you. And even sometimes a little bit over the top and almost succulently cloy, a little bit unpleasant almost. But still, as a monk, I could immediately pick up that this is not genuine. They do that because they get paid. And then sometimes they also come and they ask you, there's these little cards where you can write that you're happy with their service and so on. And it's probably important for them to keep their job or be promoted or get a pay rise or something. And I found it intriguing how I can just sense that. Probably because that becomes so normal to me that I interact with people who really come with this genuine intention of doing something good without an ulterior motive. And then even these extremely well-trained people who will have maybe even a more beautiful smile in their face, simply from the material side. But it's actually fake. They may not actually like me really, and it's just for money and for their job. And I always feel awkward if I wouldn't want to really put something onto people, which is also what we should be doing as monks. You should always be careful that you're not burdensome to people. And of course, people do have an obligation. It may not always be totally voluntary. For example, there's a strong conditioning for good Buddhists, in particular if they come from traditional Buddhist culture, from birth and childhood, then they may make an offer. Can we do something? Can we get you something? But sometimes they may not really have the means or the time, but it's just the culturally so strong condition. They make the offer. Then of course we are free according to Vinaya. If the offer is made, I can ask for something. But a good monk will always carefully consider that and try to feel out and figure out whether they really want to do it and whether they really have the time and so on. Because you wouldn't want to become burdensome. And I would feel a bit awkward if I notice someone is doing a service and they're actually really hating it and they just can't wiggle out. On the other hand, I think if you're like a billionaire or a president, CEO, dictator and so on, people in these kind of positions, maybe from childhood or long term, I think the big danger is that you don't notice it anymore. Because you're only used for people who are phoning you. So you only know fake affection and fake smiling, and even the people who are already planning how they can stick a dagger into your back whenever they get an opportunity, they will be so sweet to you, and it's simply because you're so rich or so powerful or both. And I think people in this position, they often will not notice it anymore. How can you? If everyone acts like that, and some people ever since their childhood, how will they ever be able to figure that out? And I'm very glad that I'm not in that position. I wouldn't want to be in that position. I wouldn't want to be surrounded by people who always do that for the money, whatever they do for me. So thanks for that question, interesting one. And try the food at Dhammagiri and whether you notice a difference to the restaurants or fast food shops or whatever. I mean, usually if it's a really good restaurant, for example, these really famous chefs, I think they love what they're doing. I mean, not all the time, sometimes they will be stressed, but I don't think you will succeed as a top chef if you just hate what you're doing. So you probably get also some good energy there. I think there's also a powerful effect on the other side. Usually you cook for people you love. Cooking a birthday cake, inviting an old friend over, or cooking for the family and all these things. And if you do that, I think you build up quite a strong relationship. It's a very special gift, food. It's something else. You can also give the birthday girl or the birthday boy $100, which may be noticeably more than the cost of the cake ingredients. But if you bake the cake, or if you invite them for dinner, which you cook yourself, I think it's something different. And it builds up a different kind of relationship if you feed someone with affection. And I think the idea is that this is quite a wholesome connection and a wholesome also attachment. You tend to get a bit attached to people you feed. I don't notice that much as a Buddhist monk, but I notice it with animals. And once you start feeding an animal regularly, you start building up a relationship. Fascinatingly, I think in relationships, you don't get attached to people because you get a lot from them. It doesn't work like that. It works more like, I think, the more you put in and the more you sacrifice yourself, the stronger you will be attached to the person you're doing that to. It's quite fascinating. It doesn't necessarily work if you get a lot. May even just don't like it or won't get away. But if you make sacrifices and give a lot to someone out of love and affection, it seems to strengthen that, and you're even more attached to that person. I think this is why usually parents are much more attached to the children than the children to the parents. Not always, but that seems to be kind of the default, that the parents have that stronger because they made all these huge sacrifices. But in the monastery, I think it's quite wholesome. When you come, you feed the sangha, you build a relationship. If you study in cultural anthropology, the food is just so important, and every culture, any tribe, any civilization and culture, there's so much revolving around food. Yes, another one.
This might be true. I don't want to take home any food because it might be discounted. Any advice?
A good question here for a YouTube podcast. Often people bring food, and we get so much food here that there's often leftovers. For the monks, it's utterly impossible, particularly on weekends, to eat all the food we're getting. And even everyone here joining in and sharing the meal, there may be still leftovers. And then Deng has noticed sometimes, even if you try to convince people taking their leftovers back, they're just not doing it. And now, what kind of karma is it if you end up throwing away some of this leftover food? You're certainly doing a service to the monastery, because if the food accumulates here in the fridge and so on, it just doesn't work, because we have basically too much every single day. And then I try to explain that to people if that ever comes up. Sometimes people think, the leftovers, they can be left in the fridge and then they can be served the next day. But when they arrived with their nicely prepared food, they wouldn't have gone to the fridge and checked whether there's something from yesterday, and would have taken that out and given that to the monks. They want to give their nicely, freshly prepared food. And that is the situation every day. So the first thing I would try is explaining that to people. And explaining that the next day they come with their own freshly prepared food and they will not try to get something out of the fridge. And to point out to them, you also didn't go and check whether there's some old food in the fridge, which you don't know what that is, how long has that been in there, is it still good, and what is that actually? And they didn't offer that. And as monks, we cannot go ourselves to the fridge and just take it. We can't take unoffered food. And we are not even storing that. This is stored by the lay community or the lay person staying here. So in terms of cleaning up the monastery and keeping the monastery clean and neat, and keeping the fridge and the kitchen hygienic, clean and neat, you're certainly making heaps of good karma. And the food is obviously abandoned if the donor doesn't want it back. The monks can't take it anyhow, and everyone else here, and they obviously had an opportunity to take it and didn't take it. So this is now what we considered abandoned things. And then obviously you're not under any obligation to do anything special with it. I mean, you're certainly free to take it home yourself or to give it anywhere, but I think even food banks, they wouldn't accept food which is already prepared and then gone cold and so on. It doesn't really work, you can't do that. I know some beings who would be happy to take it, but it would create huge problems, and that would be our birds here. You could, in kind of misguided compassion, start dumping it out all to the birds. And if we did that, within a short while, we wouldn't have 2 magpies and 2 butcherbirds, but hundreds of them. And it would become impossible to actually do the dana or to eat here, because it would be besieged by a huge swarm of crows and so on. It just wouldn't work. So I can't see how you possibly make bad karma by that. Something totally different. If you come in, someone puts food onto the table for the monks, and you see the food and you think, oh, and you just take it away and throw it away, and this would be really bad karma. But once it has been offered, and then even the lay community had an opportunity to take it, and you try to convince the original donor to take it back, and now it would just clutter up the fridge, then obviously a totally different situation. And I would perceive that as good karma for keeping the monastery and the kitchen clean and hygienic. This is such a high value in a monastery that things have to be clean and orderly and neat. And the kitchen in particular has to be hygienic. Hygiene, and you wouldn't want to have the fridge overflowing with different levels of food. No one knows how old. Yeah.
I don't know whether there is a perception that if they take back their own leftover food, there's a discount in the Dhamma.
The perception may be there, and there's a limit how much you can control other people's perceptions. This is why I would explain it, just like I try to explain right now. It's always good trying to explain. And the system we have here is already designed to maximize your good karma. Because first of all, you offer everything. Usually, theoretically people could hold back, but usually they put everything on the buffet, and then absolutely everything is offered to the monks. So that is to ensure that you get the maximum good karma for offering absolutely all the food you're bringing here. We may not be able to eat it, but the good intention of the offering and the receiving has already happened. And that is the most important one. And then I try to take quite a wide range, more than I would normally just pick in terms of my appetite or likings. But there's a limit with so many dishes, I can't take everything. I encourage also the other monks to do that, and even the lay people to stay here, so that we try to take at least a little bit from different dishes. And so they shouldn't worry about that. And after that is shared with the whole lay community. And then karmically, I think you have maximized what you can karmically get out of this material nutriment. And it's good to contemplate in the food ultimately. This is not the four elements, it's just matter. In a short time it is decayed, become unattractive. And it's also good not to get too attached to it. There can also be a little bit attachment. And when we practice the Dhamma diligently, the monks have all these reflections about food, and that you eat food only for the purpose of maintaining your body and leading the holy life, practicing the Dhamma. And otherwise, you contemplate, there's just four elements. You contemplate how quickly it becomes disgusting once it gets into contact with the body, once it's ingested in the body, what it is digested into and what comes out. So for these people, if they really refuse, there may also be a little bit kind of bit wrong attachment to food and a lack of contemplation that this is four elements. And the spiritual value of that food and the good karma you can make with it that has already been squeezed out to the maximum is a little bit like when you're squeezing fruit juice. Then you have got this half orange and you squeeze, and at some stage there will be no fruit juice coming out of that anymore. And then to remain attached to that peel remaining, what's the point? And I think the way the dana is done here, that is already designed to make the absolute maximum. We do the sangha dana every day, or the group, the ganda dana every day, so that people can maximize their whole good intention for the whole sangha, not just to individual monks, so that again you get maximum good karma. And the food which is left over at the end there, that is to me just the material elements, and one shouldn't be too attached to that. And refusing to take it back is also a form of attachment. It's a form of clinging. The clinging is not only grasping for it, it's also pushing things away. If you're really not attached to it, then also you don't mind taking it back. Yeah. There is a culture, there's a thing also mentioned in the suttas, that you wouldn't want to take anything from the Buddha. So for example, in Sri Lanka, when they do the Buddha puja, to my knowledge, it would be considered a very bad matter, so to speak. After that is finished, obviously the Buddha statue is not eating that food, so you just put it in front, and after some time you take it away. But it would be considered bad manners not to eat that, because the idea is that you have given it to the Buddha. If you really do a Buddha puja with food, then one should have that intention that this is kind of given to the Buddha. And the Buddha once said in the Dhammadayada Sutta, and we should be heir of the Dhamma and not heir of material things. And he gives an example that he has eaten, the Buddha himself has eaten and has finished, and he wouldn't eat anymore, but he has leftovers. And now a monk comes, now has missed the meal, is very hungry. And now the Buddha offers him that, and he says, you can eat that, otherwise I would just dump it. And the monk is really hungry and eats that food, and is okay. But there's another monk in the same situation, has missed the meal, very hungry. The Buddha says, you can eat that if you like, otherwise I just throw it away. And the monk refuses, because he feels, I want to be an heir in the Dhamma and not an heir in material things. And the Buddha says, no, the second is superior. That is superior. You wouldn't blame the monk who is hungry and would eat his leftovers, but the attitude of the second one is superior. So similar in that culture, if you put that, again, the Buddha wouldn't blame you if you eat it later. But from that teaching, the person who offers that and then doesn't eat it would be considered superior. But anyway, we're not doing Buddha puja here. We're not doing Buddha puja here. This is something else. And you're giving it to the Sangha or to the group of monks present here. No, but we consider it given up once the monks have passed by and come in here. No, I wouldn't just go out suddenly and I forgot a yogurt or a juice. No, if I come out again after the last monk is through, I would ask again whether someone can offer that to me, because I consider it given up. And I don't think that would apply. And even if you have this high standard that you wouldn't want to eat the leftovers of the Buddha, and if you don't have a Buddha here, and you have given it not only to the group of monks here.
The Mahayana practice from my own family, I noticed my elders also don't eat the food that has been offered on the shrine.
Yeah.
I often wonder where that came from.
Yeah. Dhammadaya Sutta.
Was it in which?
Majjhima Nikaya, first 10 somewhere. No?
I think maybe when the
Third, quite early, one of the first 10 in the Majjhima. It makes sense to me. I mean, the Buddha has given us so much, and then okay, this would feel strange. No? But even so, the Buddha stated, no, I remember that correctly, he stated clearly, there is no blame in the monk who eats that. They may be really hungry. There's no blame. But the second one who feels, no, I only want to take the Dhamma, and I don't want to, after getting so much from the Buddha, and I don't want to eat his food even, that is superior. Okay, Anumodana to Gary. I was sitting here waiting a long time for a question. And I was already wondering, what do I do now if nothing comes? Because at that stage it's quite difficult to get anything going. What was a good one? I trust you are here out of voluntary, wholehearted intention, and not because someone twisted your arm and forced you to be a Dhammagiri.
mostly for the food, but Dhamma,
A very nice sense of dry humor.
well, it's a lot better than I eat at home.
Yeah, that is all the devotion people put into that when they cook. I believe there's really some subtle energy in that kind of food. Okay, let's share merits with all beings.